Good morning, everyone, and welcome to November's Masterclass. I'm Michaela, and I'm the founder of Opportunity Global. And for those of you who are new to us, we develop human skills with the same rigor as technical skills, because we honestly believe that brilliant people deserve better than being promoted into a people leadership role with zero support and just a good luck message. So today, we're going to be talking about something I see everywhere. Brilliant leaders drowning in work in the build-up to the end of the year. I don't know if you felt like that a little bit sometimes. You're staying late, you're working weekends, and meanwhile, your team thinks you don't trust them with anything meaningful. And you're rushing to that end of the year marker, exhausted, probably feeling a bit overwhelmed with the never-ending list of things to do. And often in those situations, we're actually not letting go and we're trying to control everything. Yeah. So today, I would love you for the next kind of 30 or so minutes that we'll be together, just to turn off any notifications, get really present with me today. You can pop any questions into the comments. And if you really, really struggle to think about anything to ask me from today's session, you can also always chat to me about goats, because I am a goat herder, if you didn't know that already. So we'll dive into today. But if you did want to connect with me on things like LinkedIn or Instagram, feel free to, because we share loads of different content about human skills, about leadership, and how we can all better show up for ourselves and the people around us in the workplace. So we're going to dive into what we've got planned for today, which is very exciting. So often, and I don't know if you've ever kind of experienced this when you've been thinking about delegating, or you've had like a never-ending to-do list and you think, oh gosh, the next thing I need to do would be explain this to someone before I can really hand it over. And so often we don't delegate because we think that it's quicker to do these things ourselves, right? And that moment when you do delegate something and it's maybe not being done as quickly as you think you would do it, or it might be being done in a way that you would do differently. And in that situation, we often kind of explain what needs to be done, we set the deadline, and then we watch that person do it completely different way. Yeah. And what would you do in that situation, right? If we're really honest with ourselves, what happens next? And if you're anything like me, in my early days of leadership, you may swoop back in, take back that task or that project or that activity, and you do it yourself. And I'll be really honest, when that has happened, it really hasn't been my finest moment at all. So we're going to talk today about how we do this differently. Yeah. And brilliant. Thank you, Alfie, for jumping in the comments. Yes, I think we all can be guilty of that. You're not the only one, Alfie. So I know you've said in the comments, I'm dreadful at delegating and asking for help, and you always end up juggling things. I definitely have been the same at so many points in my life. And if I was really honest, I can't say that every single day I get this perfectly right. But what I will share today is just some ideas of what we can do literally this week to make that move to the end of the year just that little bit smoother is the plan. Okay, so I have honestly made that mistake more times than I want to admit. I've delegated something and I've taken it back. And honestly, like, why was I doing this? If I'm really think about it, it's because it felt at that time and at that moment easier to just do it myself than to spend the time coaching and supporting my team on how to do that big particular project, that task, or someone else in my life. And plus, if we think about it from like an ego perspective, it actually feels really good, doesn't it, to be needed? And the problem is that if we're being needed for everything in our lives and in the workplace, it means that we truly are not available for anything because we're just being pulled in so many different directions that actually it's really hard to be present, to be the most effective that we can be, and to have the impact that we want to have in the world as well. So let's dive into a couple of things that are going to help us with this. So I honestly believe that the things slowing us down most of the time in the workplace and causing the biggest conflicts when it comes to either delegating or just general communication, it often comes down to this one issue, and it's lack of clarity. So no matter how advanced your project management software might be, or you might have the most comprehensive standard operating procedures in the world, or you might have the most beautiful planning system for tasks and activities, if we're not also investing time and energy into clear communication, the rest, it just doesn't matter. We're wasting our time, our money, and our resources. So clear is kind. The brilliant Brene Brown coined this in one of her books, and it's honestly become a guiding principle for me in everything I do, whether that's delegation, giving feedback, setting expectations. For me, clarity, it's a love language. And as a leader, one of the worst things we can do is leave our team, our suppliers, our customers, the people around us guessing what's going on. And if we really think about it, we've probably all been at some point in our lives on the receiving end of vague delegation, where maybe the task isn't as clearly defined, the deadline is a bit ambiguous, a bit uncertain, or the communication plan around it is just non-existent. And what happens is that leads to frustration, inefficiency, and often a bit of a sense of chaos, actually, that no one quite knows what's going on, no one quite knows what's expected of them. And I think that if we don't make time for the clarity stuff, we'll have to make time at some point for dealing with chaos. And so what we want to think about today is how we avoid getting to that point of chaos. I actually once worked with someone who was so vague in their communication. It was often kind of a rushed Teams message here, or a rambling email, or a quick text. And it meant that the team never really knew what that person was needing. And so often they ended up defaulting to me to understand that communication. And, you know, if I really reflect on myself, it felt quite good, you know, to be needed and to be seen as someone who had a bit more kind of clarity of communication. But most importantly, it was deeply, deeply inefficient, and it slowed every single person down, and it didn't feel good for anyone. So today we're going to talk about how we overcome some of these issues around clear communication. But what I also want us to think about is when we delegate, yes, communication is really important, but it's also really important as we move to the end of the year that we also have some boundaries in place as well, because often we forget to have the boundaries, and it's that causes this kind of December hell, is what I call it. So does anyone else ever struggle with boundaries, or is it just me? I was at a graduation event 2 weeks ago now, and it was for a group of leaders that have been on a 9-month program with me and the team. And during the feedback session, it became really obvious to me that everyone was feeling this sense of busy. And if you've ever followed my content for a little while, you'll know that I actually hate the word busy. If I could, I would literally ban it from everyone's vocabulary. And I've certainly tried to for my life and work, because busyness doesn't always mean that we're adding value and that we're having the impact that we want to have in the world. And every single person at this event shared basically their kind of own version and own words of being in this mad rush to the end of the year. So things like, I'll rest then, or I have so much to get done by the end of the year. I'm full of busy, there's so much going on, and I'm feeling quite overwhelmed. And it made me think of my own previous December hells, where when I finally stopped and had any time off, I inevitably got ill with tonsillitis, weirdly. It was always tonsillitis. And I spent much of my time off feeling rough, not feeling great, not having much energy. And I kind of only really recovered in time for getting back to work. And I think we create our own December hell often and pretend that it's just the busy season and that that's okay and that's just the standard. But when we, as leaders and managers, when we push through exhaustion, your team is watching this. You know, they're seeing you get more irritable, more tired, more worn out, and they start to think that's the standard of what's the expectation is or how we all are operating. So, what can we maybe do differently to make sure that the end of the year for you is just that little bit smoother? That those boundaries that you set now in November, in December of this year, take you into 2026 and take you into 2026 in a much better place, ready to have an impact. So that's the plan for today. Now, I know we're committing to quite a lot here, right? We've only got probably just over 30 minutes together, but some of this stuff will just be introducing you to some ideas that you can then really go away and think about how you can implement in your own way, in your own workplace. Because this stuff, it doesn't have to be complicated, right? I don't believe in complicated loads of theory, right? The theory's good, but the theory has to be backed up by really practical stuff that you can actually go away and implement, and you can support your team in implementing too. So today, in that spirit, we're going to keep it really simple. We're going to cover just 3 things that will change how you work. And the first of them is stop being everyone's hero. Right? I'm going to show you why that hero cape that we're all wearing is actually one of the biggest things holding you back. The second thing we're going to talk about is a delegation framework that actually works. So it's no more of that taking things back or leaving people guessing, just really simple steps to take to make your delegation just feel so much better for you and the people that you're delegating to. And then the third one, we're going to talk a little bit about boundaries and setting them so that they stick. So not just thinking about them, but actually starting to implement them. And again, this is all practical stuff that you can use this week. So let's dive into the first one. And obviously here I've got a nice little shiny cape, which looks quite fetching, I think, actually. But one of the probably uncomfortable truths about being a person who does it all is that it feels good, doesn't it? Being needed, being the go-to person in your organization, being the one who knows lots of the answers, fixes all the problems, swoops in to save all the days. And I get it, right? I really get it. That hero cape becomes part of our identity. And letting go can actually be quite terrifying, because what if our team, our business, our organization doesn't need us as much anymore? And I do genuinely believe, but if we try to be needed for everything, it does mean we can't be available for anything. And while being a hero, it might feel, quite good in that moment, it's actually one of the fastest paths to burnout. And I think it's one of the biggest barriers to your own personal growth, as well as the growth of your team and the people around you. So my rule now that I'm trying to commit to every single day, but I'll be honest, some days it is really challenging to do. This is constant work. This isn't just learn it, implement it, and everything's fixed. But my rule now is to delegate like I mean it. So if I'm not the best person for it, or if it's not a high value activity, or if someone else could just do it, often better than me, then it's going to them, right? It sounds easy, but I'm going to show you how to do that more effectively, because it isn't always easy to do that when we are up against it and there's pressure and there's time that we need to commit to. Okay, so one of the first things to do is to get really honest about what you should actually be doing for your team in your workplace, and get really honest about your zone of genius. So where do you add the most value? What high impact revenue generating activities really light you up, and what might feel quite effortless to you but amazing to other people around you? So think about that in the context of your workplace. What are the things that you can have the most impact on, the high value stuff? And then this is the harder part. We've got to delegate everything else, like everything else, even the stuff that you're good at. Because being good and capable of doing something, it doesn't necessarily mean you should be the one doing it, right? And I do think our jobs as leaders, it's not to be the best at everything. It's to build a team of people around you that are better than you at very specific things. So have a look at your to-do list right now, either while you're on this masterclass or watching the playback, find one thing that someone else could do, maybe even better than you, and then let it go completely. No taking it back when they do it differently than you would. Really try and think about how you can let that go. And don't worry, you're not alone in this. I'm going to give you a really simple 3-step delegation framework to just make that a little bit smoother. So, step 1, get crystal clear. Like, it sounds obvious, doesn't it? But how often do we send a quick Teams message, drop a quick email, and miss the stage of having a really clear, real conversation with someone about what that delegated item is, whether it's a task, a project, whatever it might be? So I really encourage you to think about how you can have more real conversations, not email chains, but be really specific about what you want, when you'll need it, and most importantly, why it matters. Because I think sometimes we forget to give people the why behind the project, the activity, the task. And so when that context is missing, it's actually really difficult for people to understand, where that fits into the rest of the things that they're working on. So what's the urgency level? How do I reprioritize if I don't have the context? So get really crystal clear with people about what that looks like. Step 2, this is actually leans into our setting boundaries bit. So, have a think about and really share with that person in this conversation when you're delegating. What decisions can they make without you being involved? What does need your input still? And agree together some realistic timelines, commit to that deadline. And I think one of the things that we sometimes forget to do, and I definitely see this with the different leaders, managers, contributors that we work with in workplaces, that we sometimes forget to schedule the check-ins. And I think that's sometimes where frustration can come. I don't know if you've ever been in the situation, and I know I have, where I've delegated something. I think I've been really clear on deadline and stuff, but I'm getting a bit maybe nervous, a bit unsure about what progress that person's making. And I feel like I'm the one chasing them for an update. And for me, that just never feels good. I get quite frustrated when that's the situation. So I really recommend, again, simple stuff, but schedule in what those check-in moments are that you expect, so that you're not left wondering what progress they're making, where they're up to with that particular project or task. And for the other person, they're super clear on your expectations. And it just means that there's that real clarity between the two of you of what you're expecting and what the communication plan is throughout this delegation. So really think about how you can do that and set that in place. Now, the final one is probably one of the hardest, is let go and then stay out of their way. So the fastest way to kill someone's motivation or engagement is to take back what you've delegated to them. So if you've done your great job as a leader, you've hired people that are better than you at certain things. You've also coached, you supported those people. And so then getting in their way is like hiring Gordon Ramsay to be your chef and then telling them how to chop an onion. It makes no sense, right? So really think about how you can let go and stay out of that person's way so that they can really deliver on what you've set up. And those boundaries will help you feel more comfortable with that process, because you will know there's very clear expectations of how you'll be updated, what the deadline is, what the why is behind the activity or the project, and it will allow you to have a bit more comfort when you step into that letting go zone, because it isn't easy, right? And I would say I'm a recovering control freak. Am I? Yeah, no, I think I am. Maybe ask my team. But generally speaking, I'm trying to be much better than my natural tendency to try and control everything. So often that control comes from a sense of fear, a sense of uncertainty. So if you can set up as much certainty in that delegation as possible, then that will make you feel a lot less fearful and a bit more comfortable. Okay, so sometimes I'd love to say that that delegation then just goes perfectly, right? But occasionally, and often this is more often than not, particularly when you're first delegating to certain people, there'll be problems that they come back to you with, there'll be questions they come back to you with. So what I want you to think about here is, what happens when that person comes back to you with a problem? Okay, so you've delegated something, you've done all of that great communication. What happens next if they come back to you with a problem? So what I'd really like you to think about here is, instead of jumping straight into solutions or taking back what you've delegated, I'd really like you to think about using the GROW model. Now, the GROW model is a model that was set up to better coach people, right? Again, it's quite simple, quite straightforward. We could do a whole masterclass just on coaching and the GROW model. So I won't go into it in huge amounts of detail today, but I will say a couple of things just to help you use it if you delegate something and someone comes back to you with a problem. So the first thing is, think about when someone comes to you with a problem, really try and resist that urge to immediately fix it, to take it back. Instead, think about asking these 4 questions and working through with them through the GROW model. So firstly, think about asking them, what is the outcome they're trying to achieve? What is actually happening here? So what is the reality of the situation? What have they maybe tried already with this particular task or project? Really think about getting into the detail of what's happening right now. Then ask them a question about, like, what options do they see? What do they think are the potential solutions to this issue? What could they try next that might help them move forward more successfully? And then finally, ask them what their next step is. Work through with them what they will do next. When will they do it? Getting really clear on what those next steps are. So rather than just diving in to fix it, really think about how you can ask some great questions and work through this model with that person so that they're really owning the solution and the outcome, so that you're not jumping back into let's fix it mode, put the cape on and dive in and save the day. Because actually long term, that isn't going to help anyone. And this model, the GROW model, it can literally take as short a time as 5 to 10 minutes, depending on what the problem is you're solving. But it really does develop the other person's problem solving skills instead of making them even more dependent on you for everything. And often they'll come up with way better solutions than you would have, because they're much closer to it. They've been working on this task, this project that you've delegated. So they're much closer to what the answer might be. And you can just help them work through that. So you move into that coaching leadership style rather than being solution focused and very directive in your approach. So think about that next time someone comes back to you when you've delegated something. Okay. So, and again, we'll probably cover that in a future masterclass, because I'm conscious it is something that often comes up for people, those coaching skills. So we will do a deep dive on that sometime soon. Okay, so confession time for me. I once had a team member who came to me looking completely stressed out and said to me, I have absolutely no idea what you actually want. And ouch, that did hurt my little ego a little bit, I have to say. It wasn't my proudest of leadership moments. And it really reinforced to me that this mantra of clear is kind, it actually isn't just kind. It's super crucial that we're clear with the people around us when we're delegating. So this is going to help you in this run up to December, being super clear with people. So that vague email you sent, the one where you thought you were being totally obvious, it probably left your team feeling like looking at the screen and thinking, what the actual? And, if we wanted someone to read our minds, we could go and hire a psychic. But the fact is, if we want our team to succeed and we want to give them more meaningful work in the lead up to the end of the year and to take that pressure off you and the rest of the team, we've got to get specific. So if you can, when you are delegating, try and have that first conversation, either face to face, or if you're working remotely, get your cameras on, jump on a call together and get really clear on the what, the when, and the why of what you're delegating. So set those deadlines together rather than you just imposing them. So really think about the other pressing priorities, what's realistic, what else might be going on, so that that deadline feels not just aspirational, but really achievable, both for you and the team members, especially in this run up till the end of the year, where it feels like we have to do everything. That's utter bollocks. Sorry to swear, but it is. We don't need to do everything. We are human beings, right? We are not here to just constantly be doing. We are here to also live, to have an impact, to add value. It isn't just about working through a task list. So the other thing to think about, and I have, thought this before, like, please, when a team member asks you questions, and maybe many questions when you're delegating something to them, don't just sigh and think, gosh, if they were any good at their job, they wouldn't need to ask all these questions, right? Because I honestly believe when people are asking questions, that means they really care about getting this right. So give them space to ask those questions. And I've got here for you just 3 questions that I really like to use when I am delegating something, because I do think it really helps gain that clarity, and it helps you ensure that the other person is super clear on expectations. And I think it gives you that bit of reassurance, especially when we are struggling to let go of stuff. So the first question is super simple, but once you've had that discussion, you've delegated the task, you've been really clear on what's needed on the project, ask them, can you walk me through how you're planning to approach this? I think that's a really great way of checking back with them that they understand the objective, they understand the expectation, and they actually understand the why behind what they're doing. And I think that gives you that reassurance. The other great question, and I think this is a question we should be asking our teams day in, day out. What do you need from me to be successful? Yeah. What do they need from you as a leader, as a manager, to be able to do this really successfully? I think sometimes we forget to ask that question, and it does make a big difference, because then we know what some of the gaps might be. We know what some of the questions or boundaries are that they don't feel able to answer. So if we can deal with them then and there, it makes the process so much smoother. And then longer term, over time, we get into the habit of doing this, and it becomes a really nice cycle of communication. The final question, which I love to ask, is, what does done look like to you? Now, the reason I ask people that when I'm handing over a project or a task or I'm delegating something is because you then can get real clarity and really exact on what they think the outcome is that you're looking for. So rather than anyone making assumptions, me assuming they understand what I'm talking about, or them assuming that the outcome is X, we can just get real clear on what that looks like for them. And then hopefully the answer, you've done all your communication so well that actually it's exactly what you're hoping for. But if it isn't, that's still a good outcome, because you've got that space to have the conversation about, okay, what actually does need to tweak and change so that it does feel done for everyone involved. So really simple questions, but these 3 questions help us get intentional about how we're delegating. So rather than just that quick Teams message, that quick email to someone because we're full of busy, we're racing to the end of the year, what we do here instead is we take a pause, we get really intentional about how we're going to delegate something, and we ask great questions to ensure that the other person is super clear on expectations. Again, simple stuff, but these 3 questions, I think, are really powerful for gaining clarity. Okay, we talked briefly before about boundaries. So I just want to kind of close out on that and into some 3 things that you can do today to just help you set up the rest of your year. Okay, so when we think of boundaries, they need to start with an open conversation, right? So getting really clear on boundaries and expectations, it makes such a difference to our daily life at work. And I think we need to start being a bit more honest about the things that we will and won't do. The hours that we're available, what constitutes an emergency, and that the team need to bring you back involved into a project versus what can wait. Or, asking your own team what they need from you to respect their boundaries too. Because people respect honesty and open conversations way more than perfection. Yeah. No one is expecting you to be perfect as a leader or manager. That isn't fair. That's too high a bar of expectation. No one is perfect. And the worst thing that we can do is kind of have boundaries in our head that we secretly hope everyone will just figure out and follow, because they won't. And you'll end up really disappointed and a bit pissed off when those invisible boundaries get crossed. So what I want to talk to you about now is just 3 things that you can do this week. So not when you have more time, not when you have more resources, more money or anything else, just 3 simple things that you can do this week to better set up boundaries, clear communication and delegation for you to move into December and the end of the year feeling in a much, much better place, and actually setting some ways of working that will help you in 2026 as well. So these are the things that I think you can do. So firstly, create what I call your good enough list. So contrary to popular belief or what your manager or other people might be saying, not everything needs to be perfect before the end of the year. So write down, get really clear this week on what good enough looks like for your year-end deliverables. Then stop there. Don't keep adding to it, but get really, really clear on that good enough list. And if you are in a position where you have a leader, a manager in your organization that you're reporting to, have that conversation with them. Run that list by them. have an open conversation to say, is this good enough list? Is this the same as what your expectation is for the end of year deliverables? Have that clarity for yourself so that you've got the clarity for how you delegate that to your team, and then stop there. Don't try and do every single thing before the end of the year. It's not possible and it's not needed. The second part of this is having that conversation about boundaries. Sometimes it can feel a bit awkward, if I'm honest, because how often have we actually given ourselves the time and the headspace to really think about the boundaries in the workplace that allow us to do our best work and to show up in a way that feels good for us while still achieving all of the objectives, all of the goals that we've set? Probably very rarely, right? We don't give ourselves that headspace, especially as we kind of limp to the end of the year. So I really recommend that you have that honest conversation. It can feel a bit awkward, but I promise once you're in it, you will feel such gratitude for actually honoring yourself and honoring those boundaries and what's needed from you. And I think it's a great thing to really role model to your team so that they can really think about their boundaries as well. So, tell your team exactly what those boundaries are. If it's that you won't be checking email after a certain time, or if it's that the December deadlines need to be super realistic, not aspirational, that clarity prevents further chaos. So understand and take the time of what those boundaries look like for you and why, and then spend the time understanding what they look like for your team as well, and then communicate those across so that people are really, really clear, not only on expectations, but also the boundaries in which we're all operating before we go to the end of the year. So, for example, in my team, we've got quite a big, punchy project that we are working towards, but we've been really clear on what we can achieve by the end of the year and what needs to move into next year, so that we don't go into the end of December, into the festive holidays, feeling broken and burnt out. That is not a good feeling for anyone. And it's my job as a leader to prevent that happening for my team. I need to create a safe space, a safe environment where my team feels seen, heard, and supported. I'm not responsible for their happiness, because happiness involves so many different things in their lives that I can't control, but I can create an environment that feels good to work in. They can do their best work, but we're not ending up in a situation where we're stressed, overwhelmed, and feeling a bit shit. That is not my intention for the rest of the year. And my hope is that it won't be yours either. So the third thing is, ask great questions of your team, not just the kind of general, how are you? Ask your team, what is the best way for me to communicate with you? When I am delegating things to you, what's a good way of doing that? What has worked well in the past when I've delegated something? What's maybe not worked so well? And getting really clear on that helps us to improve our communication all of the time. But one of my favorite questions, and I touched upon it earlier, is, what do you need from me right now as a leader? Ask that question and then stop talking. Really listen to what they tell you, because I think that will help you plan and prepare better for the rest of the year and that move towards December. Yeah. So ask that question. What do you need from me right now? How can I make the rest of the year more successful for all of us? Okay, I'm over time. I'm conscious of that. I'm so glad, Alfie, you've had a good time on our session today. So thank you so much, people, for joining us. I'm just going to do a very quick wrap up, and then I will let you get on with the rest of the day, everyone. So sorry, we are a bit over time, because I am a bit of a chatterbox. I love this stuff. I get a bit excited. So just to touch on quickly before we close out, there's a lot of gurus out there, a lot of leadership, management people. There's loads of books, and I'm probably going to go against what some of them say, but hey ho, I believe something a bit different. So when it comes to motivating other people, when it comes to motivating and engaging your teams in the lead up to Christmas and the festive period, I believe that you can't actually motivate another person. I think that is out of our control. But what we can do as leaders and managers is create that environment where people feel heard, understand their why, and could do their best work. And that real engagement bit, when we do effective delegation, it happens in those everyday moments. So it's those moments when you truly listen to understand, not just to respond. It's when you create that space for people to have a voice, to be able to speak up. And when you really focus on building trust in a team. So when we treat each team member as a unique human in our delegation, it means they don't just feel like just another resource, but the delegation is much more effective. So rather than having like a blanket approach, really think about and spend time with your team understanding how you can better delegate to each of them. So it's not about the fancy perks. It's not even about the festive party or pizza Fridays. It's about how you show up in those small moments that really tell your team that I'm listening and that I trust you. So that communication and clarity bit is super, super, super key. Okay, so I'm not saying in this session that boundary setting and delegation is easy. This is a constant practice, right? This is constant work. They're not easy, but neither is spending your festive break recovering from tonsillitis or whatever other ailment might hit you because you've run yourself into the ground. So your future self and your family and team will thank you for having those conversations with your team now instead of burning out later. So remember, those leaders that do set boundaries, that do delegate effectively, they work smarter. They come back in January feeling refreshed rather than dreading the return. So stop trying to be everyone's hero for everything, and instead start being that leader your team actually wants and needs, and the people around you will really benefit from that. So thank you so much for joining us today. As ever, it's been glorious to be here with you. If you would like some more practical leadership tools like this, make sure that you've signed up to our newsletter. There's a QR code here for you to use. And of course, you can follow me on socials, and very happy to answer any questions. One thing I would love you to do is share back with me, either in the comments or drop me a message on socials to let me know just one thing that you think you can implement this week that is going to better support you, either in setting a boundary or being able to delegate a bit more effectively, so that we aren't saying it's just quicker to do it myself, and that we're not limping to the end of the year. It feels a bit smoother and it feels better for you. So thank you again. And I would love to hear you. So keep in touch, and we'll be back again next month with another great series in our masterclass. I really enjoy doing them. So thank you for being here. Have a wonderful day.